This is Scott Spears, and election 2012 is now in the books. President Obama has won re-election over former governor of Massachusetts, Mitt Romney, by a percentage of 50 to 48%. Joining us today to help sort all that out is one of the all-time great newsmen ever. From the Today Show to 2020 to all his great projects over the years, he's a man we like because he's from Ohio, Lima, Ohio. We can't get any better than that. Good friend of this program, excellent broadcaster. I think a guy all of us broadcasters want to be. Hugh Downs. Hugh, how are you?
I'm fine. Good to hear you.
Oh, always good to check in with you. I want to get right to it here. Obama wins re-election. Hugh, what do you make of it?
Well, I make it something that it didn't really surprise me because I knew what was going on, and it's strange in politics. It showed really that the public is ahead of its politicians. There's just no doubt about that. And both parties suffer from some division. There's a mild division among Democrats. That, many of them think that Obama should have been more forceful, particularly that first debate and so forth. And others who side with him and feel he was doing the exact right thing by not going down and doing the same kind of a battle against Romney that Romney was doing against him. So that's a division, but the profound division, I think, is in the Republican Party, which now finds itself in the Tea Party hijacked it a while back, and people were so afraid of going against those kind of super conservative views that has sullied the whole thing. And you've got Republicans, I think, that are willing to do anything just for the party rather than for the nation. And they are smart, and they do a lot from gerrymandering to election fraud of types to keep people from voting. It didn't work for them this time. The other half, not half, but at least another section of Republicans seem to have a belief that the more off base they are, the more enthusiastic they are that they're going to win. And I think these people were truly astonished that they lost, in spite of all the indications of the experts and the people who really could find out what's going on. They didn't want fact checkers to interfere with what they wanted to believe, and they were really astonished when they lost. And so none of them apparently liked the one they were stuck with, which is Romney, and Romney was considered by the smart ones sort of an empty suit. But it wasn't Romney's fault. It was the fault of what's happened to the Republican Party. And my hope is they can save themselves, because I believe in a two-party system. And I think there is a responsible Republican outlook, but that's not dominant now.
What is the main thing the Republican Party has to do in the next 4 years to save themselves?
I think they have to wake up to the fact that if they can make dialogue, if they can embrace the idea that compromise is not a bad thing, and all through history, the only progress that's been made is people are willing to compromise. If they're going to be just really firmly against and stick with that, the party's not going to survive.
You spent so many years in the public eye covering elections, news of all kind. The end result in this in the Electoral College was 332 for Obama, 206 for Romney, not really a close election by the Electoral College's standards. Florida went a way they didn't think it was going to go at all. Did the media play this up? Do you think the insiders really knew that this wasn't going to be all that close?
Absolutely, and I fault the media for this, and I hate to bite the hand that fed me for decades, but media is very guilty, I think, of trying to make a dogfight out of this that was two-sided, and because there was a lot of money at stake, and right now they're really going to be hurting because days when they had editors and people who could kind of keep an eye on what the truth was and everything. But the bottom line now with media is they're out to make money naturally, and they deserve to make some money. But they'll do anything to keep that dogfight going, which right to the last minute, and they did, and they made it look as though it affected the election because some of the public bought into that and thought it was an even thing. But the general public knew that it wasn't an even fight, that Obama was going to win. There was no doubt about it because he was a statesman, and what they had as an opponent was in the Republican Party was an empty suit.
Empty suit. I know you touched on it earlier on. What does that mean with Romney? What happened with him?
It means you can't find his core principles, because the only principle he lives by is a desire to be president, and he's been consistent on that. But he's been non-consistent on almost everything else. If he feels that what needs to be said is he takes one view of it, and then he can change it within a month, within an hour, and expect the public to buy it. And for a long time, the public was kind of buying it, and they finally saw what was really happening, and they were willing to stand in line for hours and hours to get their vote in and make sure that such a person didn't become the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States.
Hugh, we're not too far away. December 31st, the Bush tax cuts expire. The tax situation for the middle class also expires on that day. The Republican Congress has grouped them together. Obama doesn't have to worry about being reelected anymore. What's the second term for Obama look like?
Well, I think it looks like he's a man of action. He not only plans things, he does things, and I think he's not going to be bluffed into going along with something that isn't right for the nation. He'll do all right on that, I think. And of course, there's all the talk about the going over the cliff. I think that when you think of what that tax picture is, and that on your personal income, if you move into a higher tax bracket, you only pay that little bitty tax on the dollars that are higher than the one that if you're paying $100 in taxes, and you move up into the next category, it's just a tiny percentage of the amount more than the threshold. So it's not like you're suddenly going to be draining the wealth out of the wealthy. In a proper democratic republic, you've got a chance, a federal role that keeps things going in a way that allows the rich to become richer and the poor to become richer. And we've had that under certain presidents who were even wealthy, like Roosevelt. So it isn't something to be so afraid of. What to be afraid of is the idea that the cuts that they want would all come out on the back of the lower income people, the workers and so forth.
I think it's interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were very even keel all through the majority of your network news days, but I think you came out after you left the news and said that you were a member of the Libertarian Party?
Oh, no, I didn't say I was a member. I said on, what was the program I was a guest on, and I said I thought the problem with America was we only have one party. Half of it's called Republican, the other half's called Democrat. And I said, personally, I think all the good ideas come from the libertarians. And I bit my tongue as soon as I said that. But yes, I heard from libertarians who wanted me to run for office. And I never became a libertarian. I just admired some ideas that they had, which got them away from these standards, the squalid politics of the two parties that we now have. But I think something's going to change before long. Both parties are in enough trouble, and the public's going to lead them to something new. Whether it results in something like the Whigs and the Tories or a third party of some kind, I don't know. But I think it's got to change. It isn't working and the public is going to lead it to working.
People listening to this interview, I think, would probably say that you tended toward Obama. Is that true, Hugh?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did, more or less from the beginning. And you're right. While I was broadcasting, as people didn't know whether I was a Republican or a Democrat. And back in those days, I didn't know because I never voted party. I went by the individuals that I would vote for. And obviously, for obvious reasons, I didn't voice my tendency to have a more liberal outlook than not. But at the same time, as soon as I was released from that, I'm now not representing a network. I'm not a broadcaster who's obliged to keep personal views out of it, except for commentary. Commentary you can come on and say pretty much what you want, and I did some of that. But now, being freed from that, I don't hesitate to say how I feel about it.
One thing you spoke about right at the end of your network news career at ABC, and I believe made a very strong point in an interview with Barbara Walters on your last 2020, had to do with marijuana, which, strangely enough, come Tuesday night, Colorado, Washington, passed the recreational use of marijuana for the first time. What do you make of that, Hugh?
Isn't that marvelous? I don't know how we got hung up on that. That's so silly. That in 1935, Harry Anslinger, who came out against hemp, and he's the one that named it marijuana because that gave it a foreign, sinister name, and it wasn't called hemp anymore. And he fed enough cannabis to a dog to kill it, but you could do that by feeding enough salt to anything. And there was a ridiculous thing about marijuana being terribly dangerous. And actually, we don't call alcohol a drug. We always say alcohol and drugs. We don't call alcohol a drug because it's our national drug. But we go after marijuana in a way that, in the federal attitude toward it, is abysmal because they feel. You hear arguments that amuse me. They say that 80% of hard drug users started on marijuana. Well, 100% of hard drug users started on milk. So what does that mean? It's just a silly idea, I think, to keep going after marijuana, which is, and I would rather drive in a car that somebody had smoked a couple of joints than somebody who had finished his second martini and was prepared to drive the car. It just doesn't measure to be against marijuana the way that the federal government now wants to be.
Well, and I'll tell you, another thing that happened Tuesday night, I think everything was overshadowed by the presidential race, but I think something that even got a little more attention than the recreational use of marijuana was Washington, Maine, and Maryland approved same-sex marriage by voting, which broke broke a long
streak. We're getting enlightened. That's another example of the public being way ahead of their politicians.
Are you happy to see that? Do you think that will be the norm?
I think it will be, yes. I think eventually we'll get rid of the bigotry involved. I mean, how in the world does somebody, two people who love each other and happen to be of the same sex, if they want to get married, how can that harm my marriage? But there are people who are so against it that they really say it's something that will. The jokes are that if they allow same-sex marriage and you've got a wife, you better give up because you'll have to get a divorce or something. It's just ridiculous. And I think eventually it'll be okayed by the general public.
You want to end on this conversation about the election, something kind of the ridiculous. Donald Trump was out there the whole time saying things and this and that. Election night when Obama lost, he went to his Twitter page, said there needs to be a revolution, the world is laughing at us. What do you make of this guy, Hugh?
He's incredible. And I think he hides his bigotry pretty well. But, when he's been a birther for a long time, he wants to get the idea that Obama was not born where he says he was, which is ludicrous. And secondly, he wants to examine Obama's college records, as a really prime law student person who was part black could legitimately get credentials, as an attorney or the accolades that Obama has had for simply being very smart and very wise. And that's too much for Donald Trump.
You know, it was interesting, you and I think your opinion means more on this next question than anybody's I could think of. After he came out and said, $5 million, give me your class records, give me your passport, your old chum from the Today Show and 2020, Barbara Walters, really kind of laid the hammer down on him on national television. Were you shocked by that?
She did. I was proud of Barbara. I thought that made a lot of sense. Sensible people are kind of coming out and taking off the gloves and really whacking these people who are either bigots or just kind of, they're either stupid or they're venal. And I think speaking out against them is now getting more and more in vogue.
You say you were proud of her. Were you shocked that she did that on national television after knowing her now for 50 years?
Not really. No, not really. I think Barbara is a pretty frank person, really, and I can't imagine that she would be. It didn't surprise me. She would not be inhibited by that. She's kind of ahead of the game now, and I think her attitude and her actions now show a kind of a leadership that's emerging among thinking people who are now not going to stand for the old-time views and wrong-headed ultra-conservatism.
Is the Barbara Walters we see on The View, the little more loosened up, the one you saw all the years behind the scenes on the Today Show in 2020?
No, how do you mean? Is she the same?
Well, I mean, she's a little more loose on The View. I mean, it's not about interviewing world leaders and heads of state. She can speak a little bit more about her opinions. Has that always pretty well been her off camera?
Well, no, we were all a little inhibited because mostly from custom. And it was not that the network ever came to either of us and said, don't, soft pedal this or slant your ideas this way. They never did that. But there was such a thing as journalistic fashion. There were some things you just didn't do. It was like, all the time President Roosevelt was president, people knew that he had been crippled by polio. He was the head of the March of Dimes. But it was journalistic fashion not to show him being put into a wheelchair or something. And that's just the way you did things. And that was a kind of a polite way to be. Things are much more frank now. And it's an age of more frankness. And I think Barbara has always led in that, and that's why I really am proud of what she's been doing. Well,
I tell you, when this election went down, there's nobody more that I wanted to talk to once it was over to get an opinion from, because you really are, being from Ohio helps in your popularity with me, but you truly are the gold standard, and I think always were. The stories you did were fascinating, and may your relationship with me and this program go on forever. Keep on keeping on.
Same here. Good talking with you, Scott.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Take care, you.